This episode is brought to you by the book For You From Me, written by Raj Daniels. I featured Raj on episode 88 of the podcast and can genuinely say he's one of the most uniquely interesting and wise people I have ever met. He has a way of teaching practical advice through his captivating style of storytelling. I think of the book For You From Me as a lens to see the world in a more empowering way, as well as a practical guidebook to develop an effective life strategy. So make sure to check out the book For You From Me at rajdaniels.com. That's RAJDANIELS.com. Welcome everyone back to the Pathways to Success podcast. Today in studio I have Mike Muhney, who is the co-inventor of ACT and a recognized leader in entrepreneurship, software development, and relationship management. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Julian. Great to be here.
It's good to have you. And shout out to the folks who made this possible. Tom Allen.
Tom, thank you very much.
Mutual contact Jason Croft.
Jason, how you doing?
And I'm sure there's many others there. So
Yeah.
Mike, thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So Mike, obviously a critical aspect that we need to share about kind of your career is ACT, right? So tell us a little bit about ACT and how it came to be.
Okay, my best friend at the time and I, Pat Sullivan, two sales guys. I started my career with IBM in the mainframe era, so I'm a classically trained IBM sales guy. We always wanted to have a company together, and fast forward 10 years after we first met, and it was still the early days of the PC industry, we saw an opportunity to create a software product specifically for computer stores back then, for those old enough to remember places like Computerland, CompUSA, Entree Business Land. We created what I'll call a configurator for the salespeople to be able to tell a prospect who came in the store, I need 25 computers and printers and software. They could line item a discount, back solve a margin, but make sure it was going to be sold at a profit and print that out and give it to the prospect. Okay, so we tried to help the professionalism of the salesperson. We raised $100,000 from an angel out of Boston, thinking that was a growing market, stores opening up everywhere. Lo and behold, $85,000 later, Pat and I literally said to each other, Julian, this dog ain't gonna hunt, it's over, we're dead. And the angel investor thought everything was cool. He was coming down from Boston in about 3 weeks to check up on us. I had created a friendship with the CEO of one of the computer store chains, John Pertell, CompuShop, headquartered here in Richardson, 54 stores across the country that I was trying to sell it to, and my IBM training always taught us to call on the CEO. You may get delegated down, but call on the CEO. So fortunately that I did and utilized my IBM sales school training from when I worked there, and he took a liking to me. What's important about that, Julian, is you never know how valuable a relationship could be. And had I not gone to him, had gone to purchasing, which was the logical department to go to try to get them to buy this product, this might not have happened. But here's what John Pertell said. We went to him and said, John, we need your advice. The angel's coming down. We're ready to give the money back. What should we do? And he said, you two guys are smart guys. Next week is July 4th. This was 1986. Next week's July 4th. Why don't you go have a 4-hour brainstorm breakfast and see if you can come up with another idea before you throw in the towel? Well, we could afford coffee and toast, so Pat and I literally on July 4th, 1986 at 8 o'clock in the morning, we were in a booth at a restaurant south of the DFW airport, and we said, we're sitting here for 4 hours to see if we can come up with an idea to save the business or not. And so we set some guidelines, but we then said, okay, we got a blank sheet of paper. We could never use this other product we created for these store salespeople. It was a very specific application. Is there anything we need that we wish existed that I could use and you could use that would help us be more productive? Well, we looked at our day timers. It was a day timer era, and we said, we're power day timer users. If we could just take that, paper system and convert it to a software product and connect things seamlessly that should all be connected together, like activities belong with people. Like, I had to be here today at 2 o'clock to meet with you, right?
Yeah.
So that's a calendar item, but it's attached to you so that historically I can curate everything I've done with or for you, right? So we started on that thread of, gosh, there'd be so many things that belong together, and if we could create a software product that could do that, we could use it ourselves. And with that concept, we began to say, yeah, and long story short, Julian, what happened is by the time we left that morning, and I still have the original napkin, we had conceived what 9 months later was released on the market called ACT. We were that close to throwing in the towel, giving up, desperation, Hail Mary, whatever you want to call it. But because of that encouragement to dig deeper inside and see if you can be creative and think of something, we did. And so we humbled ourselves, took his advice. And here's what's fun about the story. So that's cool that we did that. And I codenamed the product YES, which was an acronym that stood for Yes, Everybody Sells. Because we saw this product that I had codenamed YES as applying to everybody. Who doesn't have contacts? Who doesn't do network management? Who doesn't have activities to keep on their to-do list, calendar, right? So everybody does that. So we saw this as something everybody could use. So what happened is for the next 3 weeks, we furiously worked on the decision tree and the screenshot. I mean, we literally architected the entire product in 3 weeks and had all these paper documents. So the angel investor came down, we picked him up at the airport, we went to lunch, and his name was John McNair, and we said, John, we've got some bad news, but we got some good news. All right, what's the bad news? And we told him margin maker's dead, why it was dead, but we had an idea we wanted to share, and he said, okay, well, what's the idea? Fortunately, he was a very patient guy, right? But we didn't know how he would respond. When you are close to losing $100,000 from anybody that invested in you, that's quite a burden.
Sure.
All right, so we told him all about Yes, and this is what he said when we were done. He said, I didn't invest in Margin Maker, the name of the product. He said, I didn't invest in Margin Maker. I invested in the two of you guys, and I like this idea better than Margin Maker. Do you need any more money? We did not anticipate that.
Wow.
We spontaneously, as you can imagine, said yes, and he said, how much? And we spontaneously said $50,000. I don't know why 50, but that was obviously a lot of money. And he literally pulled out his checkbook from his sport coat, and he gave us a $50,000 check right there at the lunch table.
Wow.
I went back to John Pertell later in that week and told him the whole story. And, hey, John, I hadn't seen him for about a month. John, we took your advice. We had a breakfast on July 4th. We conceived a product that's codenamed Yes, and here's all the documents. And we took John McNair to lunch and told him the story, and he wrote us a $50,000 check. And this is what John Pertell said, the guy that just said, hey, go brainstorm, see if you can come up with another idea. He said, I like that idea too. As a matter of fact, there's two other guys that I think might want to look at this as an investment. Let me pull together a meeting and you guys do your pitch. He pulled together the meeting, Pat and I did our pitch, and we had $400,000 in checks written. And now we were on our way, and 9 months later from July 4th, 4 days short of 9 months from conception to birth, April 1st, easy day to remember, April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1987, ACT came on the market. And there's more, fun to the story from that. But if you consider between, June of 1986 and April 1987, and by the way, in November of 87, we were offered $1 million to buy the company. Somebody saw how successful ACT had already been in just a few months. We'd already won a PC Magazine Editor's Choice Award.
Yeah.
So in 18 months, we went from closing down the business and giving $15,000 back to the original investor to somebody offering $1 million, and that person was Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful.
Are you serious?
From Shark Tank.
Oh my
He
gosh.
wasn't Shark Tank back then, of course.
Yeah.
But Mr. Wonderful, and we said, no, we're not ready to sell the company. We knew we were onto something, and this was going to be a fun product, and people were excited about it. But yeah, that was our first investor offer.
Amazing. So I'm curious, Mike, what lesson or lessons would you say that your entrepreneurial journey represents?
Oh boy. That's a good question, Julian, because a lot of times, and I have experienced failure as an entrepreneur, so sometimes you do have to shut something down. There is an end. But I guess the lesson learned in this case was don't give up. If there's one more chance, if you think of the human instinct to just survive, to just do whatever it takes to stay one more moment, to keep your nose above the water one more minute, right? Until it's obvious and all options are gone, right? So in this case, the option was think more. See if there was a reservoir in you that you could draw from that we didn't even know we had. We just needed it at that moment, and fortunately, the two of us together played off of each other. I don't know that sitting by yourself would have been as easy, I will admit that.
Yeah.
But sitting with somebody else where you could have this back and forth and kind of challenge or provoke in a good way, and from it begin to construct something. I highly value, kind of a co-developer, co-founder, if you will, co-inventor, whatever you want to call them, a partner, because you can lean on each other in a time when it really is just the two or three of you that stand together and alone, right? So that would be one of the lessons, but the main one would be just don't give up, give it everything you can, and see if there's one more chance.
What did you learn about product development in this process?
A lot of things. Good question. We never again, with ACT, succeeded in from conception to a 9-month release schedule. Everything else took longer. And the thing that Pat and I said was, the more programmers you hire, the longer it takes. We also learned that there's what we called infinite demand for the unavailable.
Infinite demand.
There's infinite demand for the unavailable. Okay. Now, when people conceive in the world we live in today with software, and hey, I want to create an app and everybody could use it. All right, it's easy to think that, and it's easy for people to say, well, sure, I would use that, until you come time to ask them to write a check. Okay. Well, I don't really need it. And here's an example. So I was spending a lot of time when ACT was in beta, getting ready for launch. I was spending a lot of time up in Manhattan, priming the pump. With both headquarter companies and VCs, et cetera. And I got introduced to the vice president of sales for Visa, okay, the credit card. And I showed him ACT. Again, it was in beta, but I showed it to him and he said, oh my gosh, I've got 500 salespeople. Every one of them could use this product, right? And I said, well, that's fantastic, right? Would you mind on your letterhead saying that and signing your name so I can take it back to our investors and board of directors just to give them a vote of confidence? Hey, this thing's going to be exciting, right? Like Visa wants to order 500 copies. Oh, sure, yeah. So he gave me a letter, and I came back home from the one trip up in Manhattan with that. And of course, the board of directors were really excited about it, right? It was just, validation. So when the day came to release it, I remember calling him up, and I forget his name. Let's say it was Mr. Smith. Hi, Mr. Smith. This is Mike Muhney from Conductor Software, which we were called at the time, ACT. And, oh, how you doing, Mike? Yeah, well, Mr. Smith, we're ready to take that 500 order from you. Can you issue a purchase order number? Well, why don't I just order 2? I'm just going to give it to 2 of my guys and let them play with it for a while. And I don't know if he ever bought any more, but we never talked after that. It was like, how do you go from 500 to 2? Right, so that was another lesson. Even though people gave validation or accreditation, doesn't mean you've got a sale. Right?
Gotcha.
And so you still have to hustle. You still have to work hard, and there's no silver bullet. It just takes a lot of work to build that early adopter base.
So let's say someone has a product or a service. I mean, it could be an app, it could be a car wash, it could be a coaching service. Is there a way, once you have conceived an idea, to test something in a low-risk way to see if the market's going to receive it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, you and I are both in the high-tech industry, and MVP, minimum viable product, is the phrase today, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What's hard is, yes, you don't want to spend more money or develop so much into a product that hasn't truly been tested yet.
Yeah.
But the market, on the other hand, I kind of have a little bit of a Steve Jobs attitude. The market doesn't really know what they want. And if you as a developer go out and ask Canvas 10 people, 100 people, you're going to get so much of a variety of answers. This thing is going to become unwieldy. And that's my concern about it. So I think you just have to commonsensically, with the resources you have, both time and money, and your instinct as the inventor, visionary, whatever, determine, well, what can I get away with? It's just enough to get people interested in it, that if I can do that with them, I can continue to grow. And so I don't totally believe in just doing an MVP, because it might not be enough for some people to say, well, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that, so no, I would never use it then. I need more, right? But the other side of that spectrum is you can't put so much in that now it's, well, I would never use all of that, but this part's cool, right? And you've spent all this money and time. So you got to strike a balance. How you do that is up to you and your team, and that's all I can say.
Gotcha. So Mike, something that you are well known for is being a relationship management expert. Why is this important?
Because the world runs on relationships. Surprise, surprise. I mean, you and I are together because of some mutual contacts that we know, Tom Allen, and Jason and people like that, right? I mean, connections occur because of a number of things, in which we're going to get to, I know. But whatever I achieve in life is only going to be possible through the quality and extent of my network. In fact, I like to say sometimes that my net worth, however you define net worth, or what it is and what you'd like it to be, is totally dependent on the quality of your networks, right? And so networks are relationships with people, right? Now, there's all sorts of relationships, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's relationships that are friends, there's transactional relationships, there's temporary relationships. I work at a company and we sell this product and I've got a customer base. But if I quit that industry, I'm probably going to lose touch with most of those people, right? But those were valuable relationships during that period. So there's all kinds of relationships, but it's the extent of how you invest in them and treat them during the time involved with each of them that will determine whether or not you're more or less successful than as much as you would like to be or could be. But having said that, Julian, I really don't like the phrase relationship management, which kind of sounds counterintuitive coming from me when since I created a category software called contact management or relationship management. Because I can't manage you. If I told you to do something, hey, can you go get me a cup of coffee? You might do that if you're going back to the kitchen. But if I say, hey, I need you to do this and this and this, you're going to go, it's not my job, right? I mean, I can't really manage the relationship. What I can manage with software, at least software as a tool, is the data. How well I manage the data is possible, but the only thing I can really manage is me. That's critical to understand. This is all common sense. This is not rocket science, but most people don't get this. They think, well, I've got a CRM system, customer relationship management system, or whatever. They've got a system. I'm managing all my relationships. I'm keeping all the balls in the air and juggling well. And okay, but what's the quality of the relationships that you have? Are you satisfied with all of them? Could they be better? Well, why aren't they better? Why don't you have more of them if you think you're that good? So the only thing that we have to understand that is manageable is yourself. How well I manage me determines your perspective of me. Your perspective of me will, in many ways, if not entirely, determine who you feel good about referring me to. You may never be a prospect for my product or service, but if you like me, if you like the way I conduct myself, yes, I've got a good product, it's got value. I mean, there are some other elements here, but if you like me, you feel that it sounds like a good guy and everybody speaks highly of him, you're going to feel good about referring me to other people. And most businesses depend on referrals, or certainly everybody wants more of them than we have, right? Well, that comes from the real critical part of the R in CRM, which I know we're talking about here. So I don't really like the phrase customer relationship management. If I am forced to stick to those three letters, here's what I think it ought to what they ought to stand for: critical reputation methods. It's all about my reputation. How well I manage me is determining my reputation, which is ahead of me, behind me, above me, below me, and all on either side of me. It surrounds me on how you and other people talk about me, and so I better conduct myself professionally, reliably, honestly, etc., such that I optimize the chances of you and everybody else I encounter speaking highly of me, which is only going to help me ultimately. Okay, so that's what I believe in. I really believe more in reputation management than relationship management.
What do you think determines the quality of a relationship?
Science did a study a number of years back on that very topic. It's an extensive, exhaustive study by sociologists, and they concluded, not that we needed them to validate this, to me it's common sense, but it's a good question. They determined that there are 4 elements to what constitutes a true, effective, meaningful relationship. So if I were to say to you, can you guess what those 4 are? I'm assuming you can come up with at least the one that most people get right away.
Trust.
Trust. Yeah. Very good. A real relationship has to have trust, obviously, right? I've got to know that I can rely on you, that what you say, you are a person of your word, okay? That's already ahead of the game above many people who aren't that way, right?
Yeah.
And we've all encountered people like that, unfortunately. But they exist. I don't want to be one of those people or thought of that way. But the other three, can you guess what any of the other three might be?
Like a competency level?
No.
Credibility?
Nope.
Um,
I'm not putting you on the spot, but
Sure,
I'm just saying, so it's interesting of what they concluded. So here they are: trust, time, the quality of the time you spend together, the intensity of the time you spend with a person, and here's the one that I think is the real linchpin: reciprocity.
Okay.
In other words, if I think you and I have a friendship, an evolving friendship, for example, right? But I'm the one that's always inviting you to go play golf or whatever. I'm always inviting you over for dinner, right, with me and my wife, whatever. But you never invite me for anything. You're always readily available if I invite you for something, but you never call me, text me, invite me for anything. That tells me there's no reciprocity. We don't really have a genuine friendship or relationship, right? We obviously are acquaintances, and you'll accommodate me, but it's not what I would constitute, nor the sociologists, constitute a real relationship. So those are the four elements: trust, time, intensity, and reciprocity. And I would suggest there's a fifth one, which is from Mike Muhney, and that is consideration. Here's an example of consideration. Let's say that you and I do have a friendship or a business relationship, and I know you've shared with me something privately, whether it's good or bad. I will just leave it anonymous. But let's say you shared something just with me, and so I'm aware that this is a real sensitive or urgent or important thing to you. And tomorrow or next week or next month, I see a magazine in a magazine rack, or a book or an article on the internet that I can send you the link to, that's pertinent to the thing that I know is really important for you, right? Without you knowing it, Julian, you were in my mind. I was considering, hey, Julian might like this. He might benefit from this. There's value for Julian with this. Let me provide it to him. I considered you. And so I would say that might be thought of as a fifth element, although I'm not a sociologist. I'm a pragmatist.
Which is consideration.
Which is consideration. Correct.
Gotcha. When you speak, Mike, about this topic, who are you talking to? Salespeople, entrepreneurs? Like, who do you have in mind whenever you talk about this?
Well, again, let's go back to what I codenamed ACT. By the way, ACT, I didn't mention ACT itself was an acronym originally that stood for Activity Control Technology.
Activity Control Technology.
Yeah, with the exclamation mark. But remember, the code name had been Yes, Everybody Sells. And so I consider that everybody is in sales. I to this day, surprisingly, I occasionally, less so, I will admit, but I still meet people that say, I'm not a salesperson. We have salespeople. I'm a CPA. I'm an engineer. I'm an architect. Really, you don't consider yourself sales? Not at all. Matter of fact, I don't even like sales, right? Well, let me ask you this. Do you have competition? Are there other engineering firms or CPA firms?
Of course. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so you do have competition? Yes. Well, sell me why you should be my CPA then. What makes you unique? What distinguishes you from them such that it's the thing that will make me choose you? So my attitude has always been, will always be, everybody sells. So from that standpoint, I talk about sales from a wide perspective. As a matter of fact, it's been documented that on average, I think the Small Business Association is the one that came up with this statistic, how right or wrong. They said on average, small SMB companies have 12% of their employees are in a sales or sales capacity role, 12%. Okay, well, what that says is there's 88% that don't see themselves that way. Well, obviously there's administration and, I get all that, but what if everybody embraced from the CEO down, and it's got to come from the top down, if the company embraced the attitude that, you know what, I may not have a quota, but everywhere I go, I really represent the company, and I have an opportunity to talk positively about the company and to position us against our competition in everybody that I meet. So, kind of, let's call it soft selling. but a sales capacity, right? Other than, hey, I just have a job, this is where I work. If you could take 10% of that 88%, which would be 8.8, let's round it up to 9%, and heck, let's round it up to 10%. If I could get 10% sales capacity out of the 88% in a company that don't see themselves as salespeople, I now have gone from 12% that are in a sales capacity, adding another 10%. So I pretty much have doubled my sales effort, which should put me in a better position above my competition. Now, I know this is an intangible or philosophical. I get that, but the point is, entire companies need to embrace an attitude that everybody in this company is in a sales position, different responsibilities, but we all sell, we all represent customer service. That's a sales effort. It's a after the sale effort, right? Existing customer, not a prospect, but I can lose customers. I better sell our customer service to them in an exceptional capacity. So yes, I speak to entire companies. I do speak to specific sales groups, obviously, especially with my IBM sales training. I was in training for 6 months back then before I was given a territory. I've gone through exhaustive, it was almost like a Harvard case study is what we had to go through, and we were nationally ranked at IBM against our class. So it was very competitive, but I was the beneficiary of an era when companies like IBM and Xerox, the two best known ones for sales training back then, spent a lot of time investing in us as salespeople. And as I reflect back, Julian, let me make this comment. I really didn't go through sales school. IBM didn't teach us how to sell. What they taught us was how to deal with more people more effectively. The result of which would then be, you'd be more successful as a salesperson. So what I speak on ultimately is how do you create more productive, effective, meaningful relationships across your company with everybody that is encountered, right? And competitively so as well. And I also talk about reputation management. So any company interested in embracing and wanting their people to see how they need to see themselves differently, that's partly what I speak on. Obviously, there's some inspirational aspects. Obviously, a lot of companies like to know about how ACT came about, and they're shocked to learn that it was not our main thought. It was an afterthought. And it's like, oh, so you failed first. So I speak about failure, oddly enough. How many people speak about failure? But in this case, the failure of Margin Maker led to the success of ACT. So don't be afraid to fail, right? Failure is part of the journey toward success.
Yeah.
But I deal with the personal side as well, the impact on my life, because I had some tragedies and heartbreak things that happened to me because of the success and stress of ACT. And that makes it real. And so I come at it from that angle as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a lot of follow-up questions about sales. Is that okay if we go deep into this?
However you want to go, it's your show, and I'm enjoying it. As you can tell, I have no problem talking. But,
okay, so so first off, let's do IBM, right? What would you say was, you talked about kind of what you got from it was more about dealing with people. What was the most important lesson you learned about sales from IBM that still rings true today? Two things,
a lot.
Sure.
But there's two things that literally stick with me. So I want you to kind of figuratively here in the audience to close your eyes for a minute and remember that first day after college. You got hired by your company. You're excited. You're finally going to have an income, and your career is beginning. Well, so I'm taking you back to Mike Muhney sitting in IBM, of all companies back then, right? I mean, there was no PC industry, so to be in IBM was quite an honor. I mean, I was excited, as anybody would be. The very first day, the very first hour of sales school, here's how IBM worked back then, at least. Everybody hired as a salesperson in the calendar month across all of America constituted the class. I was hired in December 1975, okay? There were 66 people hired in December 1975, and we were a class size then of 66. I ended up graduating number 6 out of 66, okay? Like I said, we were ranked. So my associate, my colleague, was also my fiercest competitor, right? We're trying to outdo each other. But all of us were sitting in the classroom, and IBM basically started a concept of, we want you to see yourself differently. Selling, I'll never forget, selling is a profession. Now imagine, again, you're sitting there and you're going, wow, I never thought of selling as a profession, right? I'm a professional. And what they began to do in their wisdom was to instill in us a sense of seeing ourselves in a much higher level, in a much greater valuable capacity than we otherwise did at that point. I saw myself as a college graduate, hired by IBM, and I'm going to be a salesperson, but I didn't see it the way they were beginning to form it around me and the rest of us, right? So I know this might sound like that's like a big deal, but it is a big deal because selling, and everybody sells, like I said, obviously, selling is a profession. Well, professionals handle themselves in a different capacity, or ought to, than amateurs. Most people are amateurs. Really, most people are amateurs on how they treat other people, what they do, how they do it. And I don't mean to be rude here, but here's the second one that ties in with what I just said, that validated what I just told you. So IBM taught us, as I mentioned earlier, to always call on the CEO. Even if I was going to be assigned like the General Motors account, there's no reason that the CEO of General Motors would want to talk to a low-level IBM sales guy on the team, right? It didn't matter. IBM said you always call at the top. You'll probably get delegated down based on the size of the company, but the person you're delegated down to will know that directive came from the CEO, so they're more likely to accommodate you, give you that chance, right, to create this likability factor. Mm-hmm. All right. So they taught us this concept called what's on the walls. Now today, Facebook, the wall, we think of it from an internet standpoint. There was no internet back then. IBM taught us a concept called always notice what's on the walls and talk about it. What did that mean? Well, like coming here to the office here, I noticed, kind of the atmosphere, the fun environment, the way to help the employees really feel a part of this organization. Notice are they business magazines, Fortune, Business Week? Are they golfing, boating magazines? When you get into the executive's office, notice what pictures are on their wall, what things are on their desk, because they're displaying. People have a tendency to display what is most meaningful to them, right? Whether it's even picture of kids. I got 3 kids. Yeah. Well, wow, that's good for you. But people display what they love, and people talk about what they love. Okay, these are little techniques that make a huge difference, as you're going to hear in a moment. That made it really was the light bulb that, in my mind, was the big contributor of my contribution to Co-Inventing Act, along with Pat. So I did that with every executive I called on. I noticed, hey, that's a picture of you golfing with Jack Nicklaus. What was that like? Oh, you golfed with Jack Nicklaus? Oh, yeah, it was cool. We golfed at, Augusta. Wow, well, what's Jack like? Yeah, but people talk, and when people talk, they're opening up to you. Okay. Here's what happened one day. I was in my territory. I made a cold call on a Friday afternoon. This is northern Indiana, was my territory. And the executive secretary, who IBM always taught us how to treat, because we had to get through them, we had to endear them so that they would be an advocate for us. They wouldn't be an obstacle. Right?
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, I made this cold call. The CEO came out. I forget his name, Mr. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm Mike Muhney from IBM, your IBM salesperson. Just to kind of convey, I'm here for you. It's very subtle, but I'm your IBM salesperson. And he cut me off and he went like this. Mike, I would love to hear what IBM is doing in my industry, but I'm literally getting ready to go on a 2-week skiing vacation in Colorado with my family. Feel free to contact me when I get back. Well, the what's on the wall was that he gave me a nugget of was he must like snow skiing, and he's going to Colorado, okay? The other thing was that he gave me an invitation to come back. So that was a win in many ways. But when I went out to my car, in my day timer in that era, I wrote down 2 things 3 weeks later. I thought I'd give him a week to get back and catch up. I wrote down the executive secretary's name, and I wrote down to ask him how skiing vacation went, the what's on the walls concept. 3 weeks went by, I'm on the phone, so I don't have the benefit of body language, visual cues, and got through to him. Hi, Mr. Jones, this is Mike Muhney from IBM. Oh, hi, Mike, how are you? Fine, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, how was your skiing vacation with your family? First words out of my mouth, right? Seemed like, who cares, or really, is that important, blah, blah, blah. This is a busy guy, he's a CEO. There was a moment of silence, Julian, and here's what he said, and this is almost verbatim. It made that much of an impact on me to this day. He said, you know, you're probably a pretty smart guy working for IBM, and you're probably smart enough to assume that your competitors have called on me too, which they all have, and you're the last one to contact me since I've been back. And now, again, I don't know, is that good or bad? Did I miss an opportunity? Am I too late? He said, but do you know you're the only one that asked me about my skiing vacation? They all knew about it too, but none of them asked me. What that tells me is that you are a professional. I do not like to deal with amateurs. It told me that you paid attention to me, that you cared to listen and remember and ask me about it. I only like to deal with people of that ilk. So yes, let's have that meeting, and I did end up selling him an IBM solution, which I might have anyway because I worked for IBM. That's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story, getting back to conducting myself, determines your perspective, which determines our reputation. The moral of the story is, when I asked him that question, in his mind, that distinguished me from competition and basically separated us, them to amateur level, me to professional level, from which that's the only kind of person he wanted to deal with from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And that was his item of distinction that made the difference, right? So 1 degree of difference in selling, as I like to call it. Because little things don't mean a lot, little things mean everything. And in his mind, that was the everything. Asking about something that had nothing to do with business, but it really did have everything to do with business. So there's a lot of things like that that we could probably talk a lot about, but those two have left a lasting impression and have given me a set of principles and understanding of how to win people's hearts and affections. I mean, really, selling, and again, everybody sells, everybody networks. Certainly, people might say, "I still don't believe you. No, I don't sell." Yeah, but I bet you'd admit that you network, right? Mm-hmm. You know the value of both your business and personal networks. You have to win people's affections. There has to be an emotional connection for there to be a real bond, right? Now, again, there are transactional only relationships. I get that. I'm not talking about those kind. I'm not talking about going to Home Depot and needing to buy a box of nails and talking to the salesperson there. Where's the nails, right? I'm talking about people where there's some sustainable opportunity as a customer to continue to engage with them and to perhaps obviously grow them even to an even bigger customer, and from them to get referrals, right? So, this set of principles that I attribute to IBM, the value of my IBM training, I talk about in the workshops that I conduct at companies from that sales capacity.
Gotcha. Right? We talked about trust and how it's important to developing quality relationships, right? And I think it's really important in sales. I think we can all agree that.
Yep.
And I think you actually kind of answered this already, but maybe we can spin it from a different angle. But what's the first step, and let's keep salespeople in mind, to build trust when there is none?
No, good question. I mean, there's always an initial introduction. And here's what I think is very valuable, so obvious, so practical, so simple, and most people don't do it. That I encounter, because obviously, like everybody, I meet people all the time, right? A smile. I do the very best I can within the first 30 seconds of either saying something that causes a smile, even if I can't come up with some clever saying or joke or whatever. Yeah. But if I'm smiling, "Hi, Julian, nice to meet you," right? Yeah. It creates a smile on you, and that sense of both people smiling is like dopamine. I mean, it causes the beginning of, hey, this is a down-to-earth person, seems like a likable person, because we instantly, when people meet, and ongoing as well, but when people first meet, we're instantly sizing each other up. How we look, how the strength of a handshake, the friendliness, am I dour, or hi, yeah, come on back to my office. I mean, we take visual and audible cues from people all the time. You have to work at creating an optimal atmosphere, which is easily done by just smiling, and showing pleasure in meeting somebody. Now, does that mean you're going to win the business? No, but if you don't smile, if it just, hey, I'm here for, thank you for your time. I'm here for some business. Here's what we've got. Are you interested or not? What? You haven't even sold me yet. Right? So there is what I call the dance. And so how do you begin the dance? And the dance is easily begun by a smile and friendliness. It is essential to create at all times and be aware of throughout a relationship to have what I call a likability factor. For those people that are familiar with Napoleon Hill,
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich,
Yep.
in his 25 years of research on what made the difference with all of these successful titans, what were the top 3 things that determined success or failure from them? Most people don't know that his conclusion, which I think is still valid today, the number one reason people fail, according to his exhaustive study, can you guess what it was? The number one reason people fail.
In sales?
Well, and again, yes, in sales, but everybody sells, but in a relationship.
In a relationship?
Which, and yes, that would include sales, but it doesn't matter because it's the same for both groups. Can you guess what the number one reason is that people fail in a relationship?
Not empathizing with the other person?
You're kind of close, because they're not liked.
They're not liked.
You're right. They're not liked by the other person.
Okay.
Well, okay, so if that's the case, I want to be liked. Salespeople certainly want to be liked, you would assume. What can you do to elevate the chances of being liked? Like I said, smile. Show your friendliness. Down to earth. Make fun of yourself, whatever. Be self-deprecating. Show that you're just a regular person and you're excited to meet, and kind of the sky's the limit on where this could go, but let's begin a journey and let's begin it on a positive foot. That's what I do.
What do you think are the critical components to a successful cold call to land that meeting?
In today's world,
Yeah.
preparation is essential. I mean, here's an example of just the opposite. A few years back in my company, I was wanting to fill a position, and I spoke a lot. For 3 years, I was the executive in residence for technology at UNT. And I needed a marketing intern at the time, and willing to offer a job to a student, right? I have a heart for the students and trying to help them have their own competitive edge. So a number of them scheduled an appointment with me. And I was developing an app back then and had a company, and this young lady shows up, and we sit down, and I ask her, well, have you downloaded the app? No. Did you go to our website? No. Really? And you knew I was looking for somebody in marketing of all departments to work on positioning and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And she just assumed that because I put out this call and she was an attractive young lady, and yes, she was friendly, but she didn't spend one iota of time to investigate what we were, who we were, what we were about. In today's world, with access on our smartphone devices, the internet, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, we can find a lot about people before we even first engage with them. If you're in selling and you haven't done your homework, shame on you.
Yeah.
So I think that should be a given.
Yeah. That's
Now,
great.
that's an investment of time. Some people might say that's not necessarily very productive because I got to, my manager said I got to make 100 calls a day. Well, is that productive to make 100 calls a day, or is it more productive to make 10, 3 of which you get an appointment with, or whatever? Concentrate on the value proposition, not on, let's say, a goal or an objective necessarily. And I think that's essential in selling, is to understand what is the value you're offering, not what is the goal of what your boss or company wants you to achieve that you've got to then use as the guardrail, if you will, of your activities.
I love it. I love it. Mike, what do you think is the key for the professional salesperson to really stand out in a brutally commoditized market?
Boy, that's a tough one. If I had the answer to that question, Julian, I should be charging people about $1 million a session. You know, I come back to what I've shared, the fundamentals. I've read that the great coaches of the world, Vince Lombardi, George Halas, you know, the great coaches of the world as they're known, and those today, of course, you know, have the teams practice, let's call it the Hail Mary pass, but most of the practice focuses on the fundamentals. And I think that there is, we live in a society today, a culture of short-term effort, even narcissistic. I like to say that social media, and hey, we all use social media. I'm an advocate of it. I use it, but technology is a two-edged sword, as we all know. It is. Most things are a two-edged sword. What have we given up to get value for the most part, you know, overwhelmingly, presumably, on the other part of the two-edged sword? But I say that social media ought to be called social me, because it's all about me. Vote for me, like me, watch me, you know, hire me. It's me, me, me. Well, that contradicts real relationships, because like I said, real relationships are about you. Hey, Mr. Jones, how was your skiing vacation? That was about him, not about, I'm here to sell you an IBM solution and we've got the best product for people in your industry. I don't care, I don't need it, I don't want it, you haven't sold me, you haven't touched my needs, right? So real relationships, selling, whatever, always comes back to an intense focus and effort in the other individual, not yourself. Okay.
I love it.
And so if that, you know, so it's like each of us today is a brand. I am my own brand, right? How you see me, how I present myself, I am a brand today. Everybody's their own brand. So how I position myself to distinguish myself from competition has to be top of mind for sure at all times. And so to not be a commodity with other people, I'll give you an example. When I publicly speak, I'm known for wearing very colorful sport coats.
Okay.
Literally, I've got a lavender, I've got a pink, I've got a sky blue, I've got a kind of a lime green, and I've got a bumblebee yellow, right? Now, as funny as that may sound, here's what I discovered it did when the very first time I wore one. I spoke at South by Southwest a number of years ago. And I didn't do it on purpose. I just had bought this bright green, you know, tight corduroy sport coat and, you know, blue jeans, and I'm walking around Austin, and I cannot tell you how many people came up to me, you know, young and old, you know, men and women, and complimented me or talked to me about the coat. And I discovered, wow, the coat it's a means by which people are willing to and have a reason now to come up and talk to me, because a lot of people are introverted. They don't know what to say, you know, or they view somebody, well, you know, they're so-and-so, or I'd like to talk to them, but I don't know what to say. But if you have a means by which you can stand out, distinguish yourself, and therefore get people to open up, now you can begin to engage, communicate. And communication is essential for a relationship, right? So it happened by chance that I discovered by wearing a colorful coat. I cannot tell you all the years I've been doing this, how many people come up and talk to me with no regard to age or gender or anything, and I make fun of myself with it. And so they discover in those, like I said, in the first 30 seconds, I'm already laughing and smiling, but I make fun of myself and I say to them, I don't say this all the time, given if it's a lot of women, for example, but I'll say, yeah, I'm either colorblind, or I'm old enough where I don't care, or I've got big, you know what. Pick any two of the three, right? and instantly people start laughing. But
Sure,
what they say, you know what, this is a regular guy. He's not taking himself too seriously. And again, that principle that is part of my DNA is to make people feel comfortable around me, to show them that I'm down to earth and I'm approachable and friendly, and from there, anything can happen. I have created for myself, to answer your question in another way, a relationship statement. So if I ask you, you're in business, you've got a job, you're doing this entrepreneurially. A lot of companies have a mission statement. You know, we are the best at blah, 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 although most people don't remember what their mission statement is. But if I ask people, do you have a relationship statement? They go, huh? What's that? Well, doesn't your company depend on customers and reputation and referrals? You know, don't you think you ought to have a relationship statement? Because that's what those people are the ones paying your salaries, right? No, we don't have one. Well, I've created one, and I created it where I think it's universal. You can use it if you want to, but I do use it. Not only do I use it, I live by it, okay? And here it is. It's pretty simple. So I can remember it without writing it down. I did write it down originally, but it's this. People matter. That sounds simple, right? People matter. I didn't say customers matter. Why should you treat a non-customer any different, or a person that's not a prospect, any differently, even from a business standpoint, than you would a customer? The problem that people have, in my opinion, and I've observed this over all these years, is that if I'm a salesperson and I'm trying to sell you something, and either right away or after a few meetings it's determined you're not really going to buy my product, I have lost an opportunity if I haven't done all of these other things we've been talking about, Jillian, because the chances are you won't buy my product. Chances are, right? No company is that powerful. Okay, maybe Amazon is, but very few companies are that powerful where they have a high percentage of success converting a prospect into a customer. However, a lot of people beyond that I don't know I know a lot of people that you don't know I know. And if I like you, if I trust you, all the things we've been talking about, if you impress me, let me just put it that way, in a positive, professional way, even though I'm not a prospect ever for your company's product or service, I know a lot of people in my networks, and if you've created a space in my mind and my heart, I will be an advocate for you to lead business back to you. Okay, I don't care if you're a doctor, lawyer, dentist, I don't care what you are. Everybody is a prospect. Everybody. And therefore, you can't say that customers or prospects are the only ones that matter from a business standpoint. Wrong. Even after hours, on the weekends, everybody you talk to is determining an impression of you, and by association, the company you work for. Understand that, because they could help find business for you, and help you down the road if you need a new job, or all of those other things. But the point is, people matter. The second part of my relationship statement is this: I believe, it's a true belief. I believe in the infinite potential of closer relationships. The infinite potential. You and I just met for the very first time today. We've talked, on the phone and exchanged some emails, but we met for the first time. This might be a short-term thing. We don't know yet. But if it's off to a good start, maybe we're going to discover, hey, let's get together again. Let's meet for coffee. Let's stay in touch. Okay? Pat and I, the other co-inventor of ACT, here's a perfect example of how big something can become from something so innocuous in the beginning of a relationship. We ended up serendipitously moving into the same apartment complex 2 doors apart when we both graduated from college. Okay, and obviously we met each other, and we were both starting our career in sales. Hey, 2 guys fresh out of college starting a career, we're both sales guys. Hey, let's go have a beer, and we became friends. Okay, well, because that friendship was so strong, we always said at some point, later as the years progressed, man, it'd be great to have a company together so we could work together. We're such good friends. Wouldn't it be fun to work together? Yeah, it would. Well, that opportunity came with the product that ultimately failed that led to then ACT. But ACT is still on the market today after 31 years. It created a global multi-billion-dollar annual industry called CRM from 2 sales guys that met from living 2 doors apart. And so there's a perfect example of the infinite potential of closer relationships.
Wow, that's great.
You just don't know. Okay? You just don't know. But if you don't go into it with an attitude of openness, of delight, of what could happen here, of imagination and creativity, then you're handicapping yourself. You're just, you are. And I don't believe in doing anything that might handicap potential of a close relationship with somebody else. Now, I will admit, it takes 2 people. If I could have that attitude, but if you say, hey, Mike, I only need you for this, and don't bother me for anything else. Okay, well, you've given me the signal, and I know my boundaries with you, but I'm still going to be that friendly. I'm going to be dependable, and I'm going to be those things, but you've put boundaries on me that I'm going to adhere to so that you still appreciate me because I adhere to the boundaries you've imposed, right? But if you're also open-minded like I am, who knows where this could go, Jillian, right? And so you've got to have that attitude. It really is all about attitude.
I really love that. I've never heard of anyone
Yeah.
talk about a relationship mission statement.
Yeah.
That's
And it could
and
be
you
for
have
a
a real
company.
story that backs that up.
Yeah.
It's not just something you made up.
Right.
It's,
But it's part of
yeah.
my DNA. I mean, you can't fake this.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously, because like anything, over time, if it's not genuine, it will erode and
Yeah.
it will be discovered as fake.
Yeah.
Right? And there's enough fakeness in the world today that we're all
Yeah.
faced with as a culture, unfortunately. And I don't like fake. You've got to be true to yourself, right? How do you see yourself and how do you see other people? Because all relationships are really permission based. You invited me to be here as your guest, which I appreciate. You gave me permission to talk, right? I gave you permission to take a part of my Saturday because I got other things I could have done, but we gave each other permission for a purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. So all relationships, in an ongoing sense, are permission based, right? And so as long as there's that, reciprocity and the sense of, hey, we really are getting closer, and even if I don't see you for another year or two. But if we've established something, today, that was kind of fun and exciting, we're going to act like, no time went by, and we're going to be excited to see each other.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I believe it.
Okay?
I believe it. Yeah.
And I experience that all the time because that's
Yeah.
how I treat people. They feel that from me, and compared to other people that are stiff, and I'm not, toward doing the best I can to get you to, get as close to me as you want, and me you. People see it. They see that it's real, and I have a reputation of that. I work at my reputation. I don't take it lightly. It's, when I say to people, and we've now talked about reputation, when I'm speaking, often I'll say to the audience, what is your most valuable asset? Your most valuable asset of all things, from which basically everything else in life depends. People have said, well, my health, my education, my family, those are all obviously very valuable, incredible assets. And who doesn't want health and education and whatever, good families? But I say no. There's something more fundamental than that, and it ultimately is your reputation. Because how often, and we've all experienced it. We're all human beings, so if you lived any sense of years, somebody during your life, at least one time, has said to you about somebody else, stay away from that person.
Yeah, right.
Don't go near them. Run as fast as you can. Don't buy from them. They're unreliable. They're untrustworthy. They're a scam. We've all encountered people like that. I have, right? And so what are we saying? They've got a bad reputation, and I'm trying to help you to avoid an encounter with somebody that's going to hurt you, right? So reputation determines, again, how I'm perceived, and how I'm perceived is essential to the ultimate success. And that doesn't necessarily mean financially. It could, obviously, but however I define success and achieving all I'm capable of achieving is dependent on how people talk about me, how people view me. And so at all times, I know I'm under a microscope. Now, I'm not saying that, again, in a sense of be phony and fool people to think that you're a likable guy. Some people are good at that. They're actors, right? But time will tell that that's not the real you. And I want to be the same Mike Muhney personally as I am business-wise. I want to be the same person all the time because it's easy for me then, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Mike, there's one more topic I know you're passionate about speaking on. So business is a contact sport, success, failure, and what's next? Close us out with that.
Okay. Like I alluded to earlier, Julian, I've also experienced failure. I mean, ultimate failure, heartbreak of having to shut down a company and, letting people go. But I have come to the conclusion that in my life, which is unavoidable because we all experience failure, that failure is not something to be afraid of. Failure is part of the journey towards success. Now, one of my speeches a while back at a major corporation, Fortune 500 corporation headquartered here in Dallas, the CEO put out a mandate to the company via email that said, I want you to understand, employees, that failure is okay. It's part of the process toward achieving success. I was asked to give a speech, and my speech was entitled Fail to Succeed, which is a double entendre. and I have a perfect example. I've been on both sides of that table, right? So the failure of Margin Maker led to the success of ACT.
Yeah.
But I ultimately have also just failed outright, right? So here's how I view success and failure. Especially success should not be a hammock, it should be a springboard. But I now can also say failure should also not be a hammock, not that you rest with failure, or a prison, right? Failure shouldn't be a deterrent, it should be a springboard to go to the next step, to do something, to still achieve. And so, Winston Churchill is known for saying, success is not final. I don't want to define my life about ACT. ACT was part of my journey. It showed me that I had something in me that was much greater than my own awareness and what I thought were my limited abilities. But I don't want that to define my life. It's a part of my life. If I can do that, what more am I capable of doing, right? Yeah. So success should be a springboard and not a hammock. Failure should not be an imprisonment. But Churchill said, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to go on that counts. Okay, I've lived that. And so let me put it into a sports analogy, because failure, I don't want to fail. Obviously I don't want to fail, but I'm not afraid to fail. I understand it's part of life, and from it you can learn a lot. So here's just a kind of a sports analogy. Baseball, the batter at the plate. Every attempt does not produce a hit. Well, okay, so I failed. It didn't work, failed. Every attempt does not produce a hit, and every hit does not produce a home run. But every home run is the result of both the attempt and the hit. You've got to play the game. You've got to give it your full gusto in everything that you do. Okay? And I believe in that. And I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what I choose to do, if it's going to succeed or failure. Yes, I'm hoping it succeeds, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make it succeed, but it still may ultimately fail. The best product doesn't necessarily make it to the market, right? We all know things like that happen. It comes back to, Julian, your own personal attitude, your sheer determination to discover what is capable in you that you don't even know necessarily has existed until that moment in time that it's necessary to discover, and then use that as a resource. There's a quote that I've used myself, because I have dark days. I have my down days. I have my, let's call it, I don't want to say depression. I don't need drugs or anything, but I have my, oh man, this is no good, and I'm no good, and I face that too. I'm a human being, right? But I got to overcome that, because that could just entwine me in not doing anything. It could ensnare me, right? I don't want to do that. I have the kind of attitude and drive and determination to achieve my full potential, and I don't know what that is, but I know I'm not done yet. So it's a journey, right? But here's the quote from a poet, and I'm not a poetic kind of guy, but I love this quote. 1800 era poet. He said, "Of all," now I'm going to stop here. Imagine, in the first two words of a quote, there's no room for ifs, ands, or buts, no excuses. Of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these, what might have been. Okay? I want to finish my life, God willing, mitigating as much as I can of the regrets of looking back saying, I wish I had done this, or I wish I hadn't done that. Okay? What might have been. I want to optimize achieving all that I was destined and am capable of becoming, to achieve as much of that as I can, and that is my heart and my personal drive, and that's partly what keeps me going every day, especially in my dark days.
Wow. Mike, this has been great. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm kind of speechless, and that never happens, Mike. Thank you so much for everything that you
Well, likewise,
shared.
I
This has
appreciate
been
the opportunity, and thank you for
incredible.
taking the time to listen to me talk as much as I did.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, how do people connect with you, learn more about you, work with you? Tell us all this if you would.
Well, I appreciate that. So if you want to contact me, my email address is very simple, mike@mikemuhney.com, and that's Muhney, mike@mikemuhney.com. You can check out my website at mikemuhney.com. I obviously am a professional speaker, would love to have an opportunity to speak as a keynote or departmental or regional meetings, especially sales meetings. And I also conduct workshops primarily focused around selling and the concept of a lot of the things that we've talked about today. There's more, obviously, that I didn't share, but I have half-day and full-day workshops. So I would appreciate hearing from you if you're so inclined.
And we'll make sure to plug all of Mike's information in the show notes as well. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has really, really been amazing.
I'm honored. Thank you very much, Julian. Thanks.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
so much.
All right.
And everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success podcast. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.